Have you ever noticed how certain moments feel too precise to be accidents? The right person calls at the exact second you're about to give up. A phrase from a stranger echoes the prayer you whispered last night. The timing feels so deliberate that your spirit pauses, not to analyze but to listen, because deep within you, something knows. This is not random. This is direction. God often hides his guidance in what we call coincidence. He speaks in patterns too subtle for noise and too personal for logic. The divine rarely arrives in thunder. It appears in whispers, in timing, in the small alignments that only your spirit can decode. The people who enter your life unexpectedly, the doors that close without warning, the chances that repeat. All of it may be God rearranging the map of your relationships. You see, divine direction doesn't always look like movement. Sometimes it looks like stillness, silence, even separation. But every shift carries intention. God doesn't allow encounters without purpose. Every person who crosses your path teaches you something about love, patience, forgiveness, or yourself. And when a relationship begins to drift, it doesn't always mean failure. Sometimes it means fulfillment. The lesson was completed. The season has changed. That's how heaven operates, not in chaos, but in choreography. When your heart is surrendered, coincidences turn into confirmations. You start recognizing his handwriting in conversations, his fingerprints in timing, his voice in peace. What you thought was random was a message disguised as rhythm. So the next time something aligns too perfectly to explain, don't rush to call it luck. Instead, pause and ask, God, what are you showing me here? Because what feels like coincidence is often heaven's first language, and those who listen will never walk without direction again. Before you continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment sharing a moment when a coincidence felt like God speaking to you. There are moments when God's greatest act of love feels like loss. When he begins to separate you from someone you thought you could never live without, it feels like your world is collapsing. But heaven is not cruel, it is careful. Separation is one of God's most misunderstood directions. It is not punishment, it is positioning. You may see the breakup, the distance, the sudden silence, but God sees what is coming. He sees the storms that your heart cannot yet endure, and in his mercy he creates distance to deliver you. Sometimes he closes the door not because that person was evil, but because that connection had finished its holy assignment. Every soul you meet is either meant to plant, to prune, or to propel. When the planting and pruning are complete, God moves you toward the next phase. And if you resist, the blessing turns into burden. He separates so that both hearts can heal, learn, and grow independently before they can love healthily. This direction can feel brutal because it attacks the illusion of control. You may pray, plead, and promise, Lord, I can fix this. But God doesn't need you to fix what he's already finished. His silence in the middle of your clinging isn't rejection, it's rescue. He knows that sometimes your attachment to a person becomes stronger than your attachment to him, and so he gently, or suddenly, breaks what could become your idol. Over time, the pain begins to reveal its purpose. You notice peace returning where confusion once lived. The air feels lighter. The tears that once symbolized heartbreak now feel like cleansing. The absence that once felt like punishment becomes space for presence. His presence. That's when you realize you weren't abandoned, you were released. So if God has taken someone from your path, trust his intention. What feels like subtraction is preparation for addition. What feels like goodbye is often the beginning of your next assignment. Separation is not the end of your story. It's the setting for your next chapter, where love will no longer hurt to hold. There comes a time when God begins to move the pieces of your life into harmony, slowly, silently, but unmistakably. This is the direction of alignment when what once felt scattered begins to form a pattern. It's not luck, it's not coincidence, it's heaven's timing aligning your steps with people and places designed to grow you. Alignment isn't about everything being easy, it's about everything starting to make sense. When God aligns your relationships, you notice that peace starts to replace pressure. Conversations that once drained you begin to uplift you. People appear in your path who carry the exact wisdom, encouragement, or opportunity you've been praying for. They don't come to fill your loneliness, they come to fulfill your purpose. Divine alignment doesn't compete for your attention, it completes your direction. In this season, God teaches you to recognize harmony as a form of confirmation. You begin to see that the relationships designed by Him don't demand constant effort to survive. They naturally flow with grace. There's mutual respect, spiritual maturity, and a shared sense of calling. It's not that challenges disappear. It's that conflict no longer feels destructive. It becomes refining. Both hearts learn to build, not to break. Often, the direction of alignment follows the direction of separation. God removes the wrong voices so you can hear the right ones. He clears your atmosphere so the right frequency can reach you. When you've healed enough to recognize divine peace, you stop chasing excitement and start cherishing consistency. That's when alignment happens. When your spirit becomes too grounded to settle for anything less than purpose. You'll know you've stepped into alignment when you stop trying to force outcomes. Everything that's meant to connect will connect effortlessly, not because it's easy, but because it's ordained. And those who belong in your story will begin to appear, not by effort, but by divine design. So, if you find yourself surrounded by peace, by people who challenge and comfort you in equal measure, don't question it. This is the direction of alignment. Heaven saying, "You're finally walking in rhythm with me." There are relationships that don't just enter your life, they reshape it. They hold a mirror to your soul, revealing the parts of you that still need healing, forgiveness, or faith. This is the direction of transformation, when God uses people not to please you, but to purify you. Some are sent to comfort, others are sent to confront. Either way, they are divine tools, chiseling your character into the likeness of His love. Transformation rarely feels gentle. It comes through friction, misunderstanding, and moments when your pride is tested. You pray for patience, and God sends someone who challenges your temper. You ask for unconditional love, and He allows you to face rejection. So you can learn that love is not control. You long for loyalty, and He reveals your own inconsistencies. These aren't punishments. They're lessons written in the language of relationship. God doesn't waste people. He uses them as classrooms for the soul. Every divine connection carries purpose, but purpose always requires pruning. There are people whose presence refines you. They don't make life easier. They make you truer. They call out the parts of you that need growth. And though it's uncomfortable, it's holy. Through them, God teaches grace, humility, empathy, and strength. Sometimes He keeps them for a lifetime, other times only for a season. But no matter how long they stay, they leave fingerprints of transformation on your heart. And one day, when you look back, you'll realize that every person who hurt, healed, or challenged you was part of a divine curriculum. You learned to speak softer, to listen deeper, to forgive faster. You became the version of yourself that could love without losing boundaries, someone who no longer clings in fear, but connects in freedom. So, don't resent the relationships that stretched you. Thank God for them. Because transformation is rarely found in comfort. It's found in the tension between who you were and who you're becoming. And through every sacred connection, God's voice whispers the same message. I'm not breaking you. I'm building you. Comment below. I see God's direction. One of the hardest lessons in faith is accepting that not everything you hold was meant to be kept. There comes a moment when God gently, or sometimes abruptly, redirects what you thought was permanently yours. The relationship you fought for, the friend you believed would never leave, the connection you thought was destiny. Suddenly it changes, fades, or ends. It feels like loss, but heaven calls it redirection. You see, God never removes without reason. What looks like rejection is often divine reorganization. He knows the future. You cannot see the conversations you're not part of, the hearts that have already drifted, the plans that would have pulled you off your path. When He intervenes, it is not to punish you for loving. It's to protect you from lingering where love has finished its purpose. We often mistake attachment for assignment. You may have loved with all your strength, but that doesn't mean it was meant to last forever. Some relationships were sent to awaken something inside you, to reveal potential, to build faith, or to show you what love should and should not be. Once the mission is complete, God redirects your path to ensure your growth continues. Holding on past that point doesn't preserve love. It prevents transformation. It takes humility to release what once defined you. It takes trust to believe that the one who gave you that relationship also knows when to take it back. You may not understand it now, but the same God who closed that chapter already has the next one written. And this time, it won't begin in brokenness. Later you'll see that the redirection wasn't a loss, but a recalibration. Your heart had to be freed from what limited its capacity to love rightly. God's redirection is His mercy in disguise, a course correction steering you away from heartbreak you didn't even know was waiting. So when something slips from your hands, despite your best effort, don't chase it. Bless it. Let it go with peace. Because if it were truly yours in eternity, nothing could have taken it away. The God who redirected your story hasn't finished writing it. He's just moving you closer to the part where joy finally makes sense. There comes a sacred moment in every believer's journey when God asks you to stop pushing, stop planning, and start trusting. It's the point where your desire for control meets His invitation to surrender. This is where humility is born, in the space between what you want and what God wills. To follow, rather than to force, is to confess with your life, God, your way is better even when I don't understand it. Humility in relationships is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to reach out and when to release. It's recognizing that love is not proven through persistence, but through peace. You may feel an urge to fix, to convince, to hold on, but every time you try to manipulate what heaven is managing, you invite exhaustion instead of clarity. True spiritual maturity is learning to let God lead without needing to see the entire map. When you stop forcing outcomes, you begin to sense the quiet rhythm of divine timing. You'll realize that God's plans don't need your panic, they only need your posture, one of trust, patience, and openness. Humility allows you to step aside so the Holy Spirit can step in. And when He does, things begin to unfold naturally, without strain or struggle. Sometimes, humility means walking away from what still looks promising. It means choosing obedience over attachment. It means saying, even if this never looks the way I imagined, I will still follow your direction. That's the kind of surrender that moves heaven. Not dramatic faith, but quiet faithfulness. The world tells you to chase, to fight, to prove your worth. But God whispers, be still and let me show you. The doors He opens require no forcing. They swing wide at the appointed time. And the ones that remain closed, they are sealed by mercy. When you finally stop striving, you make room for grace. You realize that your role is not to control the story, it's to cooperate with it. Because love directed by God does not need pressure, it only needs peace. And in the stillness of humility, you discover that following is the fastest path to fulfillment. There is a moment, quiet and holy, when two paths that have been moving separately under heaven's watch finally meet. It doesn't happen through striving, searching, or strategy. It happens through surrender. This is the sacred intersection of two destinies, the divine point where timing, healing, and readiness converge. Neither soul is chasing anymore. Both have learned to wait, to grow, to trust. And that's when God says, now. When two hearts arrive at that moment, they recognize one another, not by appearance but by peace. There's no rush, no fear, no need to perform. It feels like recognition, not discovery, like remembering, not beginning. You suddenly understand that all the detours, heartbreaks, and seasons of solitude were preparation for this divine alignment. Every no in your past makes sense in the presence of this yes. This intersection isn't about perfection. It's about purpose. God doesn't unite two destinies simply for romance. He connects them for redemption. Together they carry light into places they could never reach alone. Their love becomes an assignment, to reflect God's grace, to build something that outlives emotion, to serve a higher calling. Divine relationships are never merely emotional, they are instrumental. But even here, surrender is necessary. Meeting the right person at the right time doesn't end the journey, it deepens it. Each must still choose humility, forgiveness, and faith daily. The relationship becomes a living altar, where both hearts continually lay down pride for purpose. That's why God waited. He needed both souls to be healed enough to love without fear, strong enough to give without control, wise enough to protect the sacredness of what is entrusted. If you find yourself in this intersection, don't rush to define it. Honor it. Move slowly. Let the Holy Spirit guide the rhythm, because when two destinies meet under heaven's design, the connection itself becomes worship. Comment below. I'm walking in God's timing. There is a wisdom hidden in distance, a sacred kind of silence that God uses to protect, to prepare, and to purify. We often think that if something is divine, it must always stay close, always feel constant, always be available. But God's strategy is often separation, not as rejection, but as refinement. He knows that hearts too close too soon can blur their focus, confuse dependence with devotion. So he steps in and introduces distance, a holy space where growth can take root. Divine distance is not absence, it is assignment. It's the period where God works behind the scenes, molding each soul into wholeness. You may not understand why communication slows, why connection cools, or why someone you felt spiritually linked to suddenly drifts away. Yet what looks like fading is often forming. God is not erasing the bond, He's strengthening its foundation in the unseen. In the stillness, you learn to stand. In the silence, you rediscover the sound of His voice. The distance forces you to remember that your anchor was never another person. It was always Him. What feels like separation is actually sanctification, a process that burns away insecurity, impatience, and illusion, leaving only truth behind. If you resist that distance, you'll end up chasing what God is trying to strengthen. But if you surrender to it, you'll begin to see that real love, whether friendship, partnership, or divine purpose, is not fragile. It doesn't fall apart when space appears. It breathes deeper. The people meant for your destiny will not vanish when you stop holding tightly. They will stand firm when both of you are ready to meet again in maturity, not in need. Distance reveals what time conceals. It tests whether the connection was rooted in emotion or in eternity. When it's divine, time cannot weaken it. It only refines it. So, if God has placed distance between you and someone you value, don't despair. Honor the silence, grow in it, and trust that what is from Him cannot be lost, only perfected. Because sometimes the most loving thing God can do is give you space to remember who you are without them, so that when you meet again, you both know who you are with Him. There comes a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when everything that once confused you begins to fall into place. The unanswered prayers, the delayed meetings, the sudden endings, the unexplainable peace that followed the pain. All of it begins to align in your memory like pieces of a divine mosaic. This is the moment when the signs start to make sense. What once felt like chaos now looks like choreography. The patterns you couldn't see before now reveal the gentle handwriting of God across every page of your story. You start realizing that the coincidences weren't coincidences at all. That conversation that redirected your thinking, that rejection that broke your heart, that door that stayed closed, they were all divine signals preparing you for something greater. You understand now that God never wasted a tear, never allowed a delay without purpose. Every silence had a message. Every pause had protection hidden within it. When the signs begin to connect, faith turns into vision. You begin to walk differently, not by sight, but with sight. You recognize the holy symmetry between what you prayed for and what you lived through. You see that God wasn't ignoring you. He was guiding you with precision so that you wouldn't settle for anything less than destiny. Sometimes you'll even smile through your memories. The very people who hurt you became the reason you grew. The very seasons that emptied you became the soil for your calling. You'll whisper to yourself, "Now I understand." Not everything will make logical sense, but your heart will feel a peace that reason could never give. When signs start to make sense, gratitude replaces grief. The confusion fades, and clarity begins to hum quietly in your spirit. You stop demanding explanations because you finally trust the author. You realize that even the detours were directions, even the delays were deliverance. So when the dots of your past begin to connect, don't just look back with nostalgia. Look up with reverence. The same God who made sense of yesterday is still writing tomorrow. Every sign, every silence, every surprise was leading you here, to understanding, to wholeness, to purpose. To live in the rhythm of divine direction is to surrender the illusion of control and embrace the peace of being led. It's waking each day, no longer asking, "What if?" but whispering, "Whatever you will." It's understanding that every connection, every separation, every pause and every promise has been divinely orchestrated by the one who sees the full story. You stop striving for certainty because your soul finally rests in trust. You realize that God's timing is not late, it's layered. Every delay hides direction, every ending hides new beginning. When you reach this rhythm, life stops feeling random. You begin to notice God everywhere, in words, in faces, in timing, in peace. You walk slower, breathe deeper, and listen more. You don't chase signs, they find you. And even when silence returns, you no longer panic, because you've learned that silence is not absence, it's intimacy. Heaven doesn't need to shout to guide you anymore. Your heart is tuned enough to hear the whisper. Living in divine rhythm means learning to release what resists peace. It means refusing to manipulate what God is managing. You begin to understand that people will come and go, not by accident but by appointment. Some will stay to build, others will leave to bless from afar. Each serves a purpose. And through it all, your task is not to control their roles. It's to remain aligned with the director. This rhythm is freedom. It's the end of striving, the death of fear, the birth of flow. You no longer beg for clarity. You walk in confidence, knowing that if you stay surrendered, you can't step outside His will. Even mistakes become part of the melody. Even loss sounds like grace, because when you live in harmony with heaven, everything, even heartbreak, starts to sound like worship. So, let this be your prayer. Lord, Teach me to move at your pace. Slow me where I rush, steady me where I fear, and lead me wherever love demands. For when your steps align with his rhythm, you will never lose your way. You will only find purpose. Before you go, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, leave a comment of gratitude for how God has guided your relationships, and stay tuned, because the next message may be the next direction heaven wants you to hear.